Hey everybody, it is Wednesday, which means that it's time for Spill the Tea in 10, a rapid fire Q&A session for all things when it comes to teaching with more comprehensible input and communicative based strategies in your world language classroom. Let's friggin' get this party started. So first you need to tell me, what tea did you bring to the party today? Secret surprise. You ready for mine? I brought kombucha. It's technically tea, so it counts. Now, tell me in the comments below, do you like kombucha? Or are you like, that's too trendy? I don't know. Kombucha is actually really old, but yeah, it is a little trendy. I don't care though. I like it. It tastes good. It makes my tongue feel good. Here's our topic today. If you're new around these parts, we dissect a quick question from the audience of La Libre. And I am Devin, the teacher author behind La Libre Language Learning. And I help French and Spanish teachers to make their journey to proficiency a lot more practical, just like in sessions like this, where we tackle a question in 10 minutes. And today's question is really interesting. We're talking about what is the role of errors in a communicative-based classroom. If you're focused on proficiency, what's the deal with errors? So let's get right into it because we only got 10 minutes. All right, let me check and make sure that everything's working here. Looking good, looking good. Say hi in the comments below if you're here. I'm so excited to have you. And we're going to jump right into this one. So first, tell me, what do you believe the role of errors are in your classroom? How do you treat them? What do you do with them? What do you believe is important about them or not important about them? This question comes from, okay, since I'm starting to teach with more CI, this teacher asked, do I correct all of my students' errors? What's going to happen when they go to the next level and they are definitely going to receive a lot more error correction than what is going to happen in here? How is that going to affect them? So let's tackle this first question because it's the age-old one. And we certainly can't get into as much depth as I would like to in a 10-minute session, but we're going to scratch the surface a little bit just to get you curious and start thinking. With errors, my philosophy on errors is that there are no such things as errors in language learning and the whole language acquisition process. There are really only levels, because you'll notice through research that we found that L2 learners of a lot of languages, or even L3, L4, you get the gist, make similar utterances at similar times, especially when they're exposed to the same input. So what that means is that there's rhyme and reason to what's going on in your students' brains, and you should acknowledge and honor that process. The other thing, so that's my own personal philosophy behind it, is that there are not really errors in language acquisition. There are really only levels. So our job is to bump them to the next level. If you're consistently hearing or seeing in writing the same errors over and over again, that's pretty great because you know exactly where your students are at and where to push them to get them to the next level. My mom right now is learning Spanish because it pertains to her work. And I'm noticing that the types of questions that she's asking now that she's a few weeks into it are very different from when she first started. And the types of things that she's saying when she speaks are the moments where she says the incorrect statement first, and then she kind of goes back a little bit and corrects herself. Sometimes she doesn't catch it, but sometimes she does. And this process of metacognition is really important as well. So I would consider that allowing your students to make errors without jumping in and correcting them is, according to certain researchers, because like with everything, there are research certainly leans to one side, but there is research to support both sides, that error correction, if you do it too early and too often, not only does it shut down your learner, but it also doesn't allow for this essential metacognition process to happen in the brain, where students are processing their own learning and figuring out exactly what they know how to say in the simplest terms possible, what they know how to say or write or sign, and what they don't quite know how to express yet in all of those forms. So errors are crucial to the learning process, as we all know as teachers, but think about it in the language context. That means that if you're not really hearing a ton of errors, that means that you're not giving your students a lot of opportunities for meaningful output. So what does that mean needs to go on? Errors are inevitable, but let's also go back to the definition of what errors really means when you're going into second language acquisition and the whole discipline of linguistics. The definition of errors is a statement that a native speaker would never use, or an utterance that a native speaker would never use. Not something that a native speaker wouldn't understand. Not something that doesn't fit in your concept of proper grammar. It's something that a native speaker wouldn't use, because any of y'all who either have an identity that is native to the language that you're teaching or have been immersed in a native environment know and understand that native speakers use all kinds of crazy all over the map language that still has full deep grammatical structure because it's part of descriptive grammar and not prescriptive grammar. Look those things up in your spare time. Super interesting, super interesting. The other thing I want you to keep in mind with errors, and this is going to be my parting thought for you, is as you're considering how you want this to play a role in your communicative classroom, the reason that we're talking about this now is because it's really important in the building of relationships with your class, is understanding who wants to hear about when they're making non-native utterances and who does not want to hear that. Because although I'm a deep believer in research, and I will tell you that something that we all need to understand as world language educators is that I think, I was taught this way, I believe, and I see others doing it, are not at all valid reasons to do something in the classroom. They're not. What makes something a valid practice in the classroom is the combination, not individually, but the combination of research-based practice as well as collective practice. And collective practice really means that what our peers across the world are doing in real time and what they have found to work for them in multiple environments, and not just the ones that we ourselves are exposed to in our school systems or even in our country. That's why it's important to pay attention to what's going on. So when it comes to best practices with all of this and building relationships with learners, we need to take a little bit of a step outside of our realm and look at something that we've been failing at for a long time in the world language community, for centuries really, and that is understanding the learner journey. We love to, as world language teachers, accidentally treat our beginners like they want every step to be perfect. And most of them really don't. Some of them do. Some of them don't. Some of them will actually even get repelled by the, hey, actually, it sounds like this, or the marks all over the paper. Whereas some students will get excited and fired up by that and be like, ooh, I can't wait to dive into this and figure out how to say it correctly. Puts a little bit of fire under them. Here's something that you can count on. No matter what, everybody agrees on this in the research community because it's been proven so many times that we can't really argue it anymore. And don't worry, it's relatively simple, so I'm not making a blanket statement. But the number one factor in how successful a learner will be in a second language, time and time again, is motivation. So this is not something to ignore in your classroom. We're still working and looking at what exactly error correction looks like and how it influences what's going on in your classroom. But think about this in terms of relationships. that motivation is the number one thing that determines how far your students will go in language. So don't ignore it. If your students are motivated by error correction, like, yeah, I can't wait to get this right, then feed them that, no matter what the research says. If your students are totally turned off by that, then don't do it. And if yours are somewhere in the middle, and a good thing to do would also be to understand their learner journey and where they're at. For example, if you are treating your level 1 students like they're advanced students, maybe in levels 4 or 5, and like, don't even think about, like ACTFL or CEFR levels, anything like that. I'm talking about straight up where they are at in progressing in their language journey with you, like in a middle school or a high school setting. Are you working with them when they have literally just been exposed to the language? Then they're straight up beginners. And I would treat it as like, this is the first time that somebody's ever even come to this type of workout. So telling them that, oh, we're going to pick up some weights today and start doing some weight training. If you're nitpicking on, how they're gripping the weights, or, oh, you're not quite doing that movement right, like you should try it more like this, like twist your wrists. That's not what's most important here. What's most important is get them to want to come back. Get them excited to stay on the journey, because it's a really long process and it's difficult. If you're coming into a weight training class and you've been doing it for years and you get treated the same way as a beginner, you're going to be really turned off by that. So if somebody is saying to you like, oh yeah, man, like, great job, you're doing everything so well, I'm so excited to see you grab these weights today. You're like, I've been doing this for years. Like, can you give me some form, some technique? Like, can you please help me get a little bit further in my progressions? That's what your learners want. So pay attention to what stage they are at in the journey, and keep that as the focus of how you decide to answer this question. It's going to be different for which levels you teach, how much exposure your students have had to language, and how much work is needed in order to build their confidence and their relationship with language learning. And that might even go into individual differences for which students respond well to error correction and which ones don't. Again, there's a lot of research on this that's really interesting to understand. Well, some people respond really well to this and some people don't. In some situations, they respond well to this and the brain doesn't. Look it up. It's really, really interesting. But for now, I hope that this gives you enough to just get you curious and thinking about how you want to respect your learner journey for your students, and what's going to create the most motivating and effective environment for them to be immersed in a new skill with you, learning a language. So what'd you think? Was this helpful for you? Let me know below in the comments what types of things you would like to see. Give us a question for this Q&A here, because we've got a running list of things to talk about for Spill the Tea in 10, and I would love to hear what you want to hear about for the next question session. But we meet here, same time, same place, Wednesdays at 4, and sometimes my dog Ernie likes to come along. Whether she's invited or not is indeed debatable, but thanks for hanging in there. She's so sassy. All right, y'all, we're closing this out. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Let me know if you're in your first week back to school, how it's going. I hope it's amazing. And I will catch you next week, 4 p.m. EST. Bye.